Hello and welcome to the sideboard here at the Somerset Open Series. I'm Glenn Jones and I'm with Matt Costa.
Hi, good to be here.
Matt, you're playing Bant. It's not Bant as we've come to know it in Standard, though. There's no Nephalia Drownyard, no Kessig Wolf Run. This seems like more tempo-oriented build a little bit.
Yeah.
Clearly, you've got Sphinx's Revelation. You can actually own the late game that way. But you're also leaning pretty heavily on Advent of the Worm, which you got a play set of those here, supplanting the Restoration Angels. You only got two. So I guess start off by explaining to us what sent you in this direction on Bant.
Well, I've been playing the blue-white-red flash deck for as long as it's been a deck.
Sure.
Way before Boros Reckoner in Standard. And I really wanted to play a flash deck this weekend. I wasn't that excited about blue-white-red. I don't think it's positioned that well right now. And I actually talked to Jerry Thompson last night, who had been advocating this deck a little bit, and we discussed, just generally, some of the concerns that I had, and I decided I wanted to try it out.
Sure.
So it's basically, just functioning like a flash deck. The only sorceries in my deck are the two Supreme Verdicts and the two Augur of Bolas. And I basically just get to, interact at instant speed and make all their attack steps are horrible. Basically.
Yeah. With Advent of the Worm now complementing Azorius Charm, it's really difficult for people to figure out exactly how to attack. And Advent's really big, gets past a lot of the pump spells people are even playing, which, things like Gorkland Rampager are way less impressive when they're only getting through like 1 damage or whatever, even if you still get
exactly.
trade. Yeah. So you've got a few counter spells. Interestingly, you go with 1 Syncopate, 1 Dissipate. Syncopate's actually been on the rise lately.
Yeah.
But you're trimming down to 1 and playing 2 Rewinds, which, kind of a hallmark of Flash was Rewind early on, but it sort of dipped in popularity. Why do you like it now?
Again, I think it's, a lot of the way people are building their Flash decks now, they're, the red ones in particular are tending more to be sorcery speed. You have, all these Boros Reckoners, there's Thundermaw, Hellkites, and Aurelias, and you just can't really afford to hold up that much mana. But with Rewind and the fact that most of my deck costs either 2 or 4, makes it so that like when I'm rewinding on a critical turn, the mana is not going to waste. I almost always have an Advent or a Restoration Angel to follow it up with, or you can do something like Snapcaster and Azorius Charm, and it just I think it's really, like, anytime you get to rewind something and play a spell after, it's a huge tempo play, and I think that this deck is just constructed in a way to like actually take advantage of that.
So Restoration Angel has really dominated the 4 slot in decks like this for a long time. Obviously you went with the full amount of Advent of the Worms here, so can you detail us, like, beyond it just being a gigantic 5/5 that kills the opponent pretty quickly, why did you go with Advent over Resto Angel today?
In general, people are just playing big creatures right now. One of the cards that the Flash deck in some ways has trouble with is a card like Loxodon Smiter.
Sure.
You never really lose to it, but it can be annoying. So Advent is like a Restoration Angel that just eats a Smiter. Normally, like, the reason you get to play Angel is because you get to race back in the air, but Advent of Worm has Trample, so they're not like chump blocking with their Lingering Souls tokens. They're still just taking 4 from it. I just think that between that and Snapcaster Mage, Snapcaster Advent is like a really
very powerful,
really fast clock and a really powerful endgame after you've resolved a Revelation.
Sure. I imagine it also lets you be a little more liberal with your numbers for Augur of Bolas. Obviously, your hits are a lot more consistent.
Exactly. I think this deck is in the range of 24 or 25, which
very
is higher
high.
than
most
higher than
20
normal.
22.
Yeah.
All right. Well, that about covers the main deck. Beyond that, it's mostly good cards we've come to expect. You've got 1 Ghost Quarter in the main. I assume that's to handle things like Kessig Wolf Run, specifically. What else?
Kessig Wolf Run, Cavern of Souls out of a lot of the junk decks is important. And even though I'm like fairly well set up against Sire of Insanity between Azorius Charm and Silesian Charm and Unsummon, I still like the Ghost Quarter to be able to kill Cavern. Also, a lot of the sort of Bant or like Omniscience decks play Alchemist's Refuge, which is a huge problem because they get to take the whole like instant speed initiative back from me, and I just felt like the mana base could afford it. So
very reasonable choice. It's certainly becoming much closer to strip mine in this format than it has been in previous ones.
Yeah, there's decks like Naya Humans or the Human Reanimator deck that is just a wasteland against. So if you get aggressive, you can keep them off their mana, and it gets pretty good. Yeah.
Moving over to your sideboard, we have some interesting cards. A number of them have seen play before, not really that surprising. But you're packing a playset of a card that's got a lot of hype coming out of Dragon's Maze, Voice of Resurgence. What is Voice of Resurgence role in this deck? I just saw you finish dispatching a control player, beating him to death with 2/2s that bring a friend, as it were.
Well, I think he's really well positioned as a sort of like kitchen finks type card against the aggressive decks, and to the same extent against the control decks, although a lot of the time I found that you just sit there with him not attacking and not doing anything, and he's just like this like enchantment that means they can't ever cast any spells. So I think he's really good against the aggressive decks, really good against control decks, and at his worst against mid-range green, which is why I'm not positive that he's a main deck card for that reason, although after these past couple rounds, he might be. It's been really impressive. It's just an awesome card.
Yeah, clearly very powerful. The field definitely seems pretty full of green mid-range decks, so if that's your meta and call, it seems reasonable to keep him in the sideboard as well.
Yeah.
Another card from Dragon's Maze, one of my personal favorites. It's actually gotten dismissed by a few people, but I think Renounce the Guilt is really strong. You're boarding a pair of them, and what specific kinds of threats are you hoping to kill with it, beyond just the multicolored ones?
Well, in particular, Sire of Insanity, a lot of Jun's creatures, Sire of Insanity, Olivia, even Hunt
Two of his
Master.
best, yeah.
But one of the things that really convinced me to add it is against like white and red decks. It's an answer to both Assemble the Legion and Boros Reckoner, and if their plan is to like Reckoner, Harvest Fire, or Blasphemous Act me, then the only outs I have to that are the unsummons and counterspells.
Sure.
So I wanted another piece of interaction against the Reckoner decks, against decks are like Jun that are playing Sire of Insanity or Assemble the Legion. And then it's also a really good card against Obzedat out of the junk decks, and against both types of aristocrats out of the aristocrats deck. So
it kills a lot of the more troublesome permanents that those decks are trying to put into play, specifically against you. Like, they're going to bring in Obzedat against you for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And Obzedat between Celestia Charm and Unsummon is not as big a deal as the others, but
it's a much better card against blue, white, red flash, for example.
Yeah, I flat out, unless I get aggressive, can't beat an Assemble the Legion without it. So that's pretty important.
Very, very reasonable reason. You've got Clone. Clone started showing up towards the end of the previous standard season in a lot of sideboards. I assume you're playing it mostly for that same role, taking care of Angel of Serenities, occasionally interfacing with Thrag Tusks. Are there any other tricks you're leaning on Clone for?
Not in particular. I actually like it better in the red decks because you have access to Thundermaw and it allows you to get really aggressive.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, in general, it's just an awesome card against any of the sort of mid-rangey Thragtusk decks, and obviously insane against Angel of Serenity, especially if I get Restoration Angel going. Not in that specific interaction, but in general.
Well, you've obviously started off the tournament pretty well. You're 2-0, got some rounds under your belt now.
Yeah.
But have you come up with any, things where you're like, I should have smoothed this out, maybe some changes you'd like to make with the deck going forward?
Yeah, I've been really impressed with Voice of Resurgence, and I think that sort of the big picture of this deck is maybe I don't think that Augur Bolus is worth it. And I think that I would rather play Voice as a defensive 2-drop, and maybe even shave some of the either Advents or Restoration Angels. And basically, I think that the deck can function maybe slightly more aggressively with Voice, Advent, and Snapcaster. And then to mitigate the fact that I'm making myself worse against green, I was thinking that I would want to like max out on Thought Scours and play Moreland Haunt and Runechanter Spike and have that be my endgame against the mid-range decks, because in previous formats that was traditionally a really good endgame against them. And so that's where I want to take the deck. I didn't exactly know how to build it. I came up with this idea sort of about either last night or right before the player meeting. And I think Kenny Castor actually took my suggestions and was willing to move in on them, but I couldn't pull the trigger yet. So.
Well, I guess we'll have to keep an eye on Kenny as well to see which version of this deck ends up reigning supreme. Runechanter Spike with Trample also sounds pretty exciting. Yeah. Just on a personal level to me.
Yeah, it's awesome with both your instant speed 4-drops, and in general, you have right now in this build, I have 12 creatures that I can make an instant speed, so it's not easy to just surprise someone out of nowhere. And
Sure. Yeah. All right. Well, thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
Good luck in the rest of the event.
Thank you.